Well, as we've been reporting, Taiwan is in the political spotlight today, but it could soon be making headlines for another reason too, if it becomes the first place in Asia to legalize same-sex marriage. Politicians from both the governing and opposition parties have introduced proposals, but there's been growing concerns from religious groups. Here's one couple's story.
Being gay is something that's natural and what we're born with. I do think now is the time for the law to be passed. We were both aware that we like women at a very young age. So it wasn't something that's affected by environment or, bad influence or popular culture. Taiwan is quite accepting. So when people approach us on the street and they would ask us, whether we're sisters, where's the daddy, and we tell them, very frankly, that we are a gay family and these are twin babies. And for most people, when we go to the market, or it's like people who are around 50 or 60-year-old grandmas, and they've never heard of such thing. They're like, wow, I didn't know that's possible. And their reactions are mostly, wow, that's cool.
We know more than 100 couples with kids. I'm sure there are gonna be more and more family exist that we don't know. So that's why we think it's very important to pass a law to protect the family like us. If the law isn't passed yet, I don't have a parental right for my lovely kids. And Cindy is the one who holds sole custodianship. And if something really bad happened to her, I'm not the one who can raise my kids up, because the kids gonna send to foster care or whatever place, which is the biggest fear I'm having right now.
That's one couple's story there. Well, let's look at the issue more in depth now. Here with me in the studio is Daniel Luther. He's a founding member of a group called Queer Asia and now a researcher on queer theory. Also with me via webcam from Singapore is the LGBT counsellor and advocate Bryan Choong. And from Taipei in Taiwan, we're joined by the campaigner Victoria Hsu. Thank you all for joining us here on the program. Victoria, I'll start with you. Hello. This is a major step forward if it does actually get legalized in Taiwan.
Now we have 3 versions of marriage equality bills, and but all 3 versions of bills are amendments to the civil code to allow marriage to be open to same-sex couples, as well as the adoption rights. But it is hard to tell whether or not the marriage equality bill will pass, because within the 2 major parties, the ruling party DPP and the KMT, the Chinese Nationalist Party, there are oppositions within both parties. Some legislators are considering to introduce special acts, such as Same-Sex Partnership Act, to stop the passage of a marriage equality bill. So even the New Power Party, though, supports marriage equality and proposed a bill. They only have 5 seats in the Legislative Yuan, our parliament. There are 130 seats in our parliament. I think the biggest problem is that the DPP, the ruling party, led by our President Tsai, which is the majority in the legislative yuan, has neither devoted sufficient resources to communicate the issues of marriage equality, nor to reconcile the differences within the party.
But Victoria,
Yeah.
in general, attitudes in Taiwan are quite progressive towards the LGBT community when you compare it to the rest of Asia.
Yeah, you may say so. Taiwan has the biggest gay parade in Asia. And in Taiwan, the social acceptance, generally speaking, is high. This is because in Taiwan, same-sex relationships are never punished nor prohibited by law. And we have several laws and regulations regarding anti-discrimination and promoting the equality for LGBTIQ
I might just bring in, I'll bring in Bryan here. Bryan, what about in Singapore? What are attitudes there like?
Well, I think as a country, we are still largely learning how to accept the LGBT community. What is really challenging the LGBT community in Singapore is that we have Section 3778, which is a colonial law that is left behind by the British, and the government refuses to repeal it in 2007. And it was also turned down the constitutional challenge in the last 2 years. So the biggest challenge that we face is actually the legal issue. And the legal issue translates to how the society perceives the LGBT community. The government have also said many times that it's not going to actively enforce Section 3778. But our experience and many studies have shown us that the existence of the law has actually impacted many public policies and also impacted the social perception of the community itself in Singapore.
I'll just bring in Daniel here because India suffers from something very similar, colonial era law, that still remains in place.
Yeah, so this the law that Bryan is talking about is part of the Indian Penal Code, which was applied across British colonies in large parts of Asia, and is actually the model for laws in a lot of countries today in the world, in the Caribbean and in Africa. And Section 377, which we have in India, but also Pakistan, Bangladesh, criminalizes homosexuality. And as it stands in India today, that law is still valid.
It was decriminalized in 2009, I believe,
yes,
but recriminalized in 2014.
Yeah, so in 2009, the Delhi High Court read down the law to exclude consenting adults who were having sex in private. But in 2013, which is actually 11th of December 2013, the Supreme Court upheld that law. And in fact, in their judgment, they said that only a minuscule fraction of the Indian population is LGBT. So it's very ironical that a Supreme Court wouldn't stand for a minority right.
And the issues surrounding the LGBT community are still very much taboo in India.
Yeah, as Bryan had pointed out, I mean, the LGBT community is not just affected by the law, but also by social mindsets that are then reinforced by the law. So the law, in fact, allows people to blackmail members of the LGBT community, harass them. They can't go to the police station to get justice. So members of, especially members of transgender communities, are often harassed at police stations by the police officials themselves.
Whereas Victoria, in Taiwan, you were an openly lesbian candidate of the Green Party in the general election.
Yes.
So situation quite different there for you.
Yeah, running for the last legislative election was a very interesting experience. Actually, I have had my campaign all around Taiwan, including the rural areas. And I found that being an openly lesbian candidate was basically very well accepted in Taiwan's society. You know, a lot of people welcome me with hugs or holding my hands without any hesitation to show their support. Yeah, especially for young voters. Yeah.
Bryan, just tell me, I mean, how much of a role has social media, for example, played in helping people to be more expressive or willing to come out?
Well, the social media in Singapore is largely used very widely by people who belong to the younger generation or people who are tech savvy. That has definitely impacted the way how people perceive the LGBT community. And I think many organizations in Singapore, the LGBT organization in Singapore has used social media quite effectively to promote the awareness of LGBT issues in the country. The challenge is that not everybody in Singapore goes to social media and not everyone reads the message or goes to the platform that we're using. A large portion of Singaporeans still rely largely on our national newspaper and our television for a lot of information. And because of the censorship issues, many of these individuals will never be able to understand LGBT issues because these issues were never reported in our newspapers, never reported on our television, and never reported on our radio stations. So that's one hurdle we are trying to overcome. So when the government always try to defend the retaining of Section 377A, they say that Singapore is a conservative society, but they will allow the law to change when the society evolves. The problem is that when there's so much censorship that's going on, there's no way the society can understand LGBT issues, and then there's no way the society will evolve eventually.
Daniel, in India, though, it's slightly different. It feels like, you know, Bollywood, for example, and the media have embraced the idea of the issues surrounding the LGBT community.
I think there is yes, there is greater acceptance than general society as far as Bollywood goes, and the English media definitely. But even in Bollywood, it has been a very gradual and more recent step that has that there is positive representations. And in fact, Aligarh, which was a film that was released recently, dealt with one such instance. But a lot of times in Bollywood, especially older generation Bollywood, gay characters usually play comic relief rather than, you know, are represented having real life struggles.
And dealing with serious issues.
Yeah.
Daniel, Victoria, Bryan, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you all for joining us here on the program.